Morning. Good morning to our resource persons and for those present here today. This hearing is called to order. The first part of this hearing will focus on two Senate bills that are proposing to institutionalize the parameters provided under BSP Circular Number 940, Series of 2017, entitled Guidelines on Deposit and Cash Servicing Outside of Bank Premises. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas has been pushing for this as a means to attain financial inclusion in the far-flung barangay in the country. According to the World Bank, financial inclusion means that individuals and businesses have access to useful and affordable financial products and services that meet their needs delivered in a responsible and sustainable way. Ngunit sa pag-aaral na ginawa ng BSP nitong 2019, lumalabas na 28.6% lamang ang may bank account ownership rate sa bansa.
Ano? 28%.
28.6% po. At kahit na ito ay tumaas kumpara noong 2017, hindi pa rin ito sapat kung nais nating mapalawig ang mga Pilipinong maaaring maserbisyohan ng ating mga bangko, lalo na yung mga nasa kanayunan at lugar na low income. The second part of today's hearing will tackle three bills that are pushing for the protection of the remittances of our modern-day heroes, ang mga kababayan nating overseas Filipino workers or OFWs. Base sa datos na nakalap ng Philippine Statistics Office noong 2019, ay nagkaroon ng humigit kumulang na 2.2 million na OFWs sa iba't ibang bansa. Meanwhile, BSP said that the personal remittances that came from these overseas workers reached a record high of 33.5 billion in the same year. This figure is more or less consistent as 2018 saw 32.2 billion, while 2020 still delivered 24.3 billion in spite of the raging pandemic. Sa laki ng ambag ng mga OFWs sa ating ekonomiya, nararapat lamang na bigyan sila ng karampatang proteksyon pagdating sa kanilang kinikita. And this precisely is the objective of the bills pending before our committee. They want the amount remitted by OFWs to be free from exorbitant, if not usurious interest rates and prohibitive banking fees. Especially in this time of a global pandemic, it is truly unconscionable to subject our OFWs to such an inequitable ordeal. Finally, the third part of this hearing will focus on Senate Bill number 2139, which proposes significant amendments to certain provisions of the Charter of the Philippine Veterans Bank or PVB. It should be noted that the original charter limang dekada na ang nakalipas mula noong maisabatas ito. Thus, many of the proposed amendments here are attempts to realign the same with the more recent laws such as the General Banking Law of 2000 and the Revised Corporation Code, among others. The measure's objective is to increase the bank's future viability while paying homage to the selflessness given to the country's veterans and retired military personnel. Our brave soldiers deserve nothing less. Before I yield the floor to my fellow senators or senator who are joining us today, may I request the committee's secretary to read the names of our resource persons. But before that, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our hardworking majority leader, Senator Frank Drilon. Good to see you again, sir.
Correction, I am the minority leader, not the majority leader.
Oh, I'm sorry, but it seems that that's really a debatable assertion. Anyway, I would like to ask my correction. I stand to be corrected. Our hardworking minority leader, who is loved by the majority as well. May we ask the Secretariat to please read the names of our resource persons and their designation. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator Drilon. We have the following resource persons from the Department of Finance, Ms. Annabel Magno, from the Fiscal Policy and Planning Office, and we also have Director Valerie Brion. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have Mr. Joselito Chad Jacinto, Special Assistant, Office of the Undersecretary for Multilateral and International Economic Relations, and Ms. Joarlene Espiritu, Legislative Liaison Staff. From the Department of National Defense, we have Mr. Ernesto G. Carolina, Administrator of the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, Attorney Rolando D. Villaflor, Chief of PIBAO Legal Affairs Division, Attorney R.J. C. Lim, Department of Legislative Liaison Specialist of the DND, Attorney Raymond Zenon Palmera, Attorney 3, and EVP General Mon Santos. From the Department of Trade and Industry, we have Attorney Cheryl Carbonell, Assistant Director, Consumer Protection and Advocacy Bureau. From the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, we have Attorney Arifa A. Ala, Assistant Governor, Financial Supervision Subsector 3. Attorney Rosilio O. Prado, Director, Financial Supervision Department 8. Ms. Ellen Joyce L. Suficiencia, Director, Financial Inclusion Office. Ms. Maria Cynthia M. Season, Officer in Charge, Supervisory Policy and Research Department. Attorney Dennis A. Gamaya, Acting Deputy Director, International Operations Department. Ms. Ana Rowena G. Imperial, Acting Deputy Director, Financial Supervision Department 8. Ms. Rosel R. Manalo, Acting Bank Officer 6, Department of Economic Research. Mr. Jade Eric Redoblado, Bank Officer 5, Department of Economic Research. Ms. Rosalie M. Fernandez, Bank Officer 5, Department of Economic Statistics. Attorney Alexis M. Cervantes, Manager, International Operations Department. Ms. Maricel C. Sevenorio, Manager, Financial Supervision Department 8. Ms. Mary P. Santos, Bank Officer 5, Department of Economic Statistics. Mr. Jacobin Fermin V. Ambrosio, Bank Officer 2, Department of Economic Statistics. Ms. Maria Angelica B. Villena, Acting Deputy Director, Department of Economic Statistics. We also have from the BSP Support Group, Attorney April Michelle D. Salamatin, Legal Officer 4. Attorney Ann Caroline C. Bugayong Cruz, Legal Officer 3. Attorney PB Samantha S. Alianige, Legal Officer 3. They are from the Office of the General Counsel and Legal Services. From the Bureau of Internal Revenue, we have Attorney Marie Gretchen Mondragon, Action Lawyer, Office of the Commissioner and Law and Legislative Division. From the Securities and Exchange Commission, we have Attorney Gerardo Artan Jr., Securities Review Counsel, Office of the General Counsel, and Attorney Christine Dorothy Leal, Securities Counsel 2 from the Corporate Governance and Finance Department. From the Anti-Money Laundering Council Secretariat, we have Attorney Mel Georgie Biracela, the Executive Director. From the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, we have Ms. Jocelyn O. Hapal, Director 4. From the Philippine Veterans Bank, we have Mr. Roberto De Ocampo, the Chairman, Mr. Renato A. Clarabal, the President and COO, and Attorney Federico A. Manalo, a Director from the Philippine Veterans Bank. From the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, we have Mr. Win Sapian, Consultant. From the Bankers Association of the Philippines, we have Mr. Benjamin P. Castillo, BAP Managing Director, and Mr. Arnel N. Almaden, BAP Associate Director. From the Kabalikat ng Migranteng Pilipino, Inc., we have Mr. Luther Calderon, the President. From the Veterans Federation of the Philippines, we have BFE veteran Roberto C. Fernandez, the Regional President for NCR of the Veterans Federation of the Philippines. From the Secure Connection Cybersecurity Team, we have Ms. Grace Mirandilla Santos, together with Gamaliel Pascual, Lito Averia Jr., and Nino Gutierrez. That would be all for the meantime, Madam Chair.
Thank you to our Secretariat. Does our minority leader have an opening statement? Or
I will just raise the statements that I'll raise these policy issues when we ask questions. Madam
thank you,
Chair.
sir. Perhaps we can begin with BSP. Our question would be, of course, we are all in line with you. We agree that financial inclusion is key also to grow our banking sector and eventually our economy. Would you please explain how institutionalizing the 2017 BSP guidelines will help for financial inclusion in our country? If you have a presentation to make, I would like to remind all of our resource persons, nobody wants to have a long Zoom meeting. Since we have a lot to tackle, just keep your presentations, questions, and responses short. Let's begin with the BSP.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and to the rest of the body. If I may be allowed to share the general comments of the BSP on the Senate Bill number 1643 po.
Go ahead. When you speak, identify yourselves because our screen is limited.
Yes,
sometimes we can't see who's speaking, and it would be helpful to know.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're
this is
Ellen
Joyce. This is Joyce Suficiencia po of the Financial Inclusion Office of the Bangko Sentral.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Suficiencia.
Yes, ma'am. So the BSP supports the objective of the Senate Bill number 1643 to establish a regulatory environment for innovation and to expand the reach of banks to remote or rural areas through cash agents. The regulation on the engagement of banks of cash agents is currently governed by BSP Circular number 940 series of 2017. Under this circular, banks are required to secure prior BSP approval before they can engage third-party entities as their cash agents. More specifically, banks are required at the minimum to adopt clearly defined written policies and procedures and controls for its cash agent operations, including but not limited to cash agent selection, due diligence, and customer care arrangements before they can be granted authority to engage cash agents. These policies are required to be consistent with the standards and requirements set under existing BSP regulations. Start my video. So regulations, particularly on outsourcing, consumer protection, anti-money laundering, information technology, and operational risk management. Once approved by the BSP, a bank may continuously undertake or implement cash agent operations unless otherwise prohibited by the BSP. So the circular authorizes cash agents contracted by banks to accept and disburse cash on behalf of the bank in connection with the following online self-service customer transactions, including deposits, withdrawals, fund transfers, and bills payment. Cash agents can also perform know your customer procedures, as well as collect and forward application documents for loan and account opening. However, the circular does not prescribe the specific criteria and procedures for evaluation and selection of cash agents. It also does not provide exclusivity of cash agency and does not involve itself in the evaluation and selection of cash agents contracted by banks. The framework adopted by BSP under this circular is consistent with its overall regulatory approach, which places greater emphasis on the governance role and responsibility of a bank's board of directors and on the effectiveness of risk management systems. Notably, the circular, as codified in our Manual of Regulations for Banks, provides sufficient guidance for banks intending to implement cash agent operations as a viable business strategy. The legislators may consider the current framework embodied in the circular as it provides the BSP with flexibility in crafting relevant regulations as well as revisiting the same as warranted. That's it, Mr. Chair, Ms. Chair, Madam Chair.
I have a quick question, just for the benefit of the body. Can you please explain to us, give us an example of current cash agents that are already working? Obviously these are not just individuals. So tell us, who are cash agents right now in the current setup?
Yes, ma'am. So if I may give us an example, the Cebuana Luwilier Rural Bank, it's a rural bank that has tapped its network of pawn shops across the country. I think those are, that totals to a number of 2,500 pawn shop outlets nationwide as their cash agents. So in their pawn shop outlets, a client may apply for a micro savings account. That micro savings account is actually a deposit account with the Cebuana Luwilier Rural Bank.
So this, for example, Palawan Express, are they also cash agent?
Yes, ma'am. They can be cash agents of. There are currently 13 banks that have cash agent operations. I'm not sure lang po which of these banks have tapped Palawan as their cash agent.
For example, you have a grocery chain that carries, let's say, load for telephones, let's say Globe or Smart. Can, let's say, the representative of one of those telco companies become a cash agent? Can you bank, let's say, through GCash?
So the cash agent is essentially, ma'am, parang a cash-heavy or cash-rich retail outlet. So that can be a convenience store, as you mentioned. Some banks are tapping cooperatives. The cooperatives. There are also those types of retail outlets that have liquidity at hand, so they can also service the cash out requirements of the bank clients.
Now, who does the selection or the accreditation of a cash agent? In the bill, it's a BSP, right?
Yes, in the circular, ma'am, it's the bank itself. The BSP just approves the bank's application to implement cash agent operations, but we leave the definition of the selection criteria and as well as their policies on cash agent selection to the banks po.
Oh, so okay. So before you can actually qualify as a cash agent, you actually have to be connected to a bank.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Okay, so
yes, ma'am.
For example, I have a store. I cannot just be a cash agent unless I'm aligned with, as you mentioned, Cebuana or maybe BPI or BDO, Metro Bank, those banks, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Unless
now,
yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, will you, as a cash agent, follow the fee schedule and also the policies of the bank or the main bank that you're connected with?
Yes, ma'am. So your partnership or your agent arrangement will be governed by your contract with the bank.
Okay. Now, when it comes to monitoring, who will be monitoring these cash agents that they're actually not overcharging clients? Will it be the BSP or should it be the DTI?
So, ma'am, under our circular, the bank assumes full responsibility and liability for all acts and omissions of their agents. So, we monitor the banks, and the banks are expected to monitor and ensure compliance of their agents.
Okay, so I have another question. Okay, because we're talking about cash heavy cash agents, retail outlets. Thank you for the proper term. Let's say there's a sari store, okay, that's actually cash heavy. It's the only available convenience store in that remote area. Can they, even if they're not a corporation, just a mom and pop setup, make an arrangement with a bank and then be an authorized cash agent.
Yes, ma'am. So under our circular, we did not prescribe the minimum criteria for what the banks can tap as their cash agents. So we leave that to the bank. So if the banks are, in their criteria, they would consider even barangay permit as a minimum required. They would accept that as a registration, a business registration. Then that should be okay. So what will define really the onboarding of cash agents is the selection criteria defined by the banks po.
Okay, so that means the bank will assume responsibility. For example, they ran out of cash, they took in, but they cannot actually sustain the withdrawals being done. The main bank will have to step in and cover those, right?
Yes, ma'am. So the banks can also set limits, transaction limits for each cash agent. So this is also in line with their risk management policy.
Okay, so tell me, enumerate the services that can be done by a cash agent.
So the cash agent can facilitate deposit and withdrawal transactions performed by the customer, of course, on his bank account, fund transfers, bills payment. They can also do know your customer and know your customer to facilitate client onboarding. They can also collect and forward applications for opening.
About loans?
Yes, ma'am. Accept and forward loan application documents.
Okay. Well, those are my questions for now. If our minority leader have additional questions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And to be candid, this is the first time I am made aware of the cash agent system in the banking industry. But having said that, the first principle that I would like to establish is the cash agent is the agent of the bank, not of the client. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that the bank, the contracting bank, is bound by the acts of the agent as a matter of law. Tama po ba
Yes,
yan?
yes, Senator.
Now, let me focus your attention to Section 14. Section 14. Section 14, this is on page 7, line 7. If you can focus on that, please.
Section 14.
I'm focusing on Section 14 because firstly, this is a bank. And secondly, you have agreed that the cash agents are agents of the bank. But the way Section 14 is crafted, it would appear that this principle that the bank, contracting bank, is bound by the acts of the agent is diluted. Okay, first, you're saying here that the contracting bank is liable for all acts and or omissions of the cash agent, provided such act is within the bounds of the agency. So, did you notice that? Does that mean that the bank's contracting bank can assert that the act of the contracting agent is not authorized by the contracting bank, and therefore the third party would have no one to look to in case of the malfeasance or misfeasance of the cash agent?
Yes, Senator. So actually, in the circular of the BSP, it's crafted a bit differently. So under our circular, we say that the bank assumes full responsibility and liability for all acts and omissions of its cash agents on bank-related services. That's the only qualifier we put in the circular. But as you mentioned po in the proposed bill, there's an escape clause, if I can
Yes.
call it that, for the, because it has a broader escape clause. But in the circular po, it limits only to bank-related services.
Yes, but maybe we can amend that. I mean, we can include in the bill that the liability shall be full liability. In other words, it is the contracting bank who approves who the cash agents are, and therefore it is the contracting bank's responsibility to supervise the cash agents. The cash agent is no different from an ordinary teller. Would you agree with
Yes.
me? Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
An ordinary teller the bank would be bound by all the acts of the ordinary teller, because as a depositor, I deal with the agent of the bank. Di ba tama yun?
Yes, yes, Mr. Senator.
So since I deal with the agent of the bank, why should there be a lot of escape clauses like this one?
Yes. Yeah, so that's why I mentioned for our circular. I think that one is as far as consumer protection friendly, because
In fact, I would not qualify it by saying in relation to banking transactions, because the acts of the teller, which is the equivalent of the cash agent, would bind the bank whatever he does or she does. So I would have even that
bank related.
the phrase bank related. There can be varied interpretations, and if we are going to have cash agents which will perform the functions of the contracting bank, the contracting bank should be liable. I mean, should be jointly and severally liable for all the acts of the contracting agent, especially here of the bank agent, especially here that the bank agent, I mean, the cash agent is outside of the premise of the bank. So I have that. So we will. So maybe you can suggest language that will amend that proviso. All right. The second one is on line 10 of the same page, the same section. It says, contracting bank shall exercise due diligence to ensure its cash agents comply with applicable rules, etc., etc. The standard is due diligence. Isn't the standard extraordinary diligence? There's a difference in law between due diligence and extraordinary diligence. Again, this is it is not even the central bank who approves the cash agents. It is the contracting bank. So, and here the cash agent deals with the public. Now, why should the diligence required be that only of a due diligence and not extraordinary diligence? In other words, what I'm leading to, ma'am, is that we should make the rules clear so that the depositing public will not be holding the empty bag. We should extract the highest degree of diligence on this on these cash agents. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. That's your existing bank circular. Ano ba yan?
940 po.
Yeah. Does it? What does it provide?
So the language is similar as far as using the term due diligence is concerned.
I don't agree with that. And if you want legislation, if you want to institutionalize the system, I would strongly suggest that instead of due diligence, it should be extraordinary diligence because you are dealing here with the public, with the hard-earned money of the depositing public, and it is the contracting bank which approves the status of the application of the cash agent. It is not the Bangko Central. Di ba? The Bangko
Yes, sir.
Sentral only approves the application for the deployment of cash agents, but not the qualification of the entity itself as a cash agent
Yes, sir. Under our circular, yes. po.
under your circular. And therefore, that strengthens my proposal that we should extract the highest form of diligence on the contracting bank. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer po, sir, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but just as a concept.
Yes, but as a concept, yes po.
Yeah, as a concept. Yes, as a concept. All I am driving at is that the diligence required of the contracting bank should be no different from the diligence required of an ordinary bank on its tellers. Hindi po
Yes,
ba?
sir. Yes, sir.
So that's all. Okay, so at least we can amend it. Firstly, that the contracting bank, that the cash agent is the agent of the contracting bank, not of the depositor. I want that very clear.
Yes,
Number
sir.
two, that the qualifying phrase provided such act is within the bounds of the agency on lines on section 14 should be amended so that the liability should be absolute and not qualified by this, since these are the agents of the contracting bank. And number three, that consistent with that, the due diligence should be replaced with extraordinary diligence. Okay. Now, I hope that the good chair, the secretariat, took note of those suggestions, Madam Chair. Yeah.
We have, to our good minority leader, we have, and we thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. The chair mentioned in her opening remarks that the purpose of that only 28.6% of our population would have access to the banks. Is that a correct recollection, Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Yes, to our minority leader. Oh,
Yes.
that low.
That low. And the purpose of the bill is as found on line 7 on page line 7, 6 and 7, is to, quote, allow banks to exponentially expand reach through cash agents and serve a wider client base, particularly in the low-income and rural areas. It would, it's just a statement, and I have no issue with that. But how many banks and branches do we have today?
Let me get back to you on that, sir. I'll just quickly
Because the premise is that we do not have enough banks and branches, especially in the rural areas. And this is the principal reason why we have only 28.6% would have access to banks.
Miss.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, actually, to our minority leader, I think that part also of the reason, which is included in this bill, is financial education to our countrymen. Many of our countrymen are not really very familiar with the system. And then the last time we also studied the matter, many of our countrymen are intimidated to enter a setup, like even in the rural areas, when they see a bank, they feel that they don't have the proper documentation. Hopefully with the national ID system, it will work. And then I think that that's why there's that informal economy of like underground lenders, etc. Because even if the terms are not very good, they're familiar with the people that they're dealing with. So I think that majority of our workers now here, even in the Philippines, send their money to their relatives in the provinces through these Palawan Express and also Cebuana Luwilier. So I think maybe that's also the reason why this bill hopes to institutionalize the inclusion of these cash agents, so that there's also direct responsibility from these cash agents to a company that has the means and the capability to cover those transactions. That's what I can think of. I think nai-intimidate talaga pumasok sa bangko yung ibang...
No issue with the need to pass this bill, Madam Chair. In fact, I think it's needed. From where I sit, we must strengthen the protection of our people who would utilize the cash agents more than anything else. Really, it would appear that at this point, it's a little loose insofar as the liabilities are concerned. That is of the contracting bank. That is why I see the need for this law, which would address that issue. I am just raising the premises for which this bill is being proposed. And my previous questions would really point to the need of this law to provide more protection to our depositing public who would transact with these cash agents. By the way, Madam Ciencia, how many cash agents do we have today?
Based on our latest figure po, 17,000 cash agents across the country, and they are serving close to 79% of our LGUs po.
Can you say that again? 17,000 cash agents?
Yes, sir.
And serving how many?
79% of LGUs.
79% of...
They cover 79% of the LGUs.
Well, LGU, as we understand...
sorry, municipalities po. Sorry about that. Municipalities po.
79% of municipalities. So theoretically, at least on paper, we are saying that only 81% of the municipalities in the Philippines would have no cash agents. Tama ba yun?
So yeah,
more or less.
Parang 21% po.
Yes,
Lang,
about 21%
Yes,
would have no cash agents.
Yes po.
And it is reasonable to assume that these 21% of these municipalities are found in remote areas where there are really no banking transactions or negligible banking transactions.
Yes po.
Now, which really means that again, I go back, the principal purpose of this should be really to regulate and safeguard the interest of the depositing public. I'm surprised, Madam Chair, at the number of cash agents operating today. As if there are 4,500 municipalities, you're just talking about what, 900 municipalities who have no cash agents, and if there are 4,500 municipalities, 20% of that is roughly 900. So that 900 municipalities would now have no cash agents from the testimony. Correct me if I'm wrong, Madam BSP.
That's correct, Mr.
That's why, Senator Drilon, I think that we need to hear from the BSP how many banks are there. Maybe nag-overtake na ng cash agents yung number of banks, which is, I mean, if that's the way the consumers deal with the financial system, then I guess we just have to improve the services and also the liability against cash agents. So do you have that figure now? How many banks do we actually have?
Yes, ma'am. If we're talking about total number of banks, there are 500. 523 banks po.
These are
These are the based on head office count po. But for financial inclusion, where we talk about access points po, we consider branches as access points. So for financial inclusion purposes po, we look at how many, what percentage of our LGUs don't have banking presence.
Ma'am, can I have a quick question?
Sige.
523 banks, these are 523 different companies.
Yes, 528 actual licensed banks.
So out of those 523, let's say one of them will have 100 branches. Tama?
Yeah. A total po of 12,591 branches.
Okay, so
How many?
12,000.
1,591 branches.
And then how many again are your cash agents?
17,000 po.
Okay, thank you.
So, in other words, Madam Chair, we have already, in effect, 29,500, more or less, deposit receiving outlets in the entire country. And that is why you're saying that 80% of our municipalities are covered. Is that correct, ma'am?
If I may interpret, Senator Dulon, did you come up
Yes.
with that number by adding the 12,591 bank branches and the 17,000 cash agents?
Yes. The 17,000 cash agents is the testimony of the Bangko Central, ma'am. They just mentioned that in the course of her presentation. There are
So
17,000 cash agents today.
That's why. So, Miss Joyce, please respond.
Yes, ma'am. So, yes, sir. So there are the cash agents cover 79% of the LGUs. But if we're talking also of other access points that do cash-ins, but not necessarily banks, for instance, cooperatives po, that will cover 95% po has 95% of our LGUs have at least one access point. And that access point can include the non-stop and savings loan associations po, which also accept cash-ins, and then cooperatives offering financial services po. But for banking presence, yung branches po lang 68% po.
Yeah, all right.
0.8%.
We're just talking here about expanding, about the available network, or what you call as access points. And we are saying 95% of all our municipalities would have at least one financial institution which serves as an access point. From your testimony, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, Mr. Senator.
So now, which really means that we have to enact, that we should really have policies which should protect those who deal with with these access points. Which strengthens my my proposition that the reason that it is not lack of access points in our country, but really the level of income. If there is no disposable income that you can deposit, you can have the perfect all municipalities, all barangays with access points for financial transactions. Your savings rate will still be the same because that's the level of poverty that we have. For example, if if you look at the statistics on the poverty rate in the country, on the hunger rate in the country, which is according to the SWS, at least 50% consider themselves poor, you can assume that they have no extra income, disposable income, which they can deposit in these access points. Tama po ba yun? Would you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. Senator.
So that we should, as I said, I support this bill, but we should stop the pretense that we have to provide more access points because there are more deposits there that are not in the banking system. The deposit, the cash that is not in the banking system is used on a day-to-day basis by our people. Hindi ba na, wala mo na silang income, paano pa sila magkaroon ng savings? So I just want to establish that of record, to put things in the proper perspective. But as I said, I have no problems with this because your statement that there are 12,591 branches, there are 17,000 cash agents, or a total of nearly 30,000, plus the co-ops and etc., which covers 95% of our municipalities, really indicate the need for a stronger regulatory system. That is why, Madam Chair, I was pointing to Section 14, which we should strengthen if we are to achieve the purpose of this bill.
I agree. To our minority leader, I think that with the suggestions that you have put forth, we certainly have to make sure that these cash agents are capable really of providing the service, number one, and that the depositors or the clients are protected. So if we have to spell out what the safeguard should be, then we will consider that, of course, when we submit the committee report with the cooperation of the good Senate Minority Leader's Office.
Yes, we will, and maybe on that point, we can amend Section 2 on the declaration of policy in order to incorporate that principle or that policy that we should strengthen the regulatory environment for these cash agents.
We can move to the next topic. We already took all of this.
If there are no more, are there other concerns by our minority leader? Okay.
Just one more, ma'am. Just to clarify and emphasize this, that that having a cash agent would not need the approval of the Bangko Central. It is the contracting bank. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now.
So
Yes.
So yes, Mr. Senator. So the bank only gets the approval of the BSP at the start of its cash agent operations. But the moment it gets the BSP approval, they don't have to secure BSP approval for every cash agent that they onboard.
Right. I'm just concerned about the responsibility of the bank with your statement of fact. The bank, the contracting bank, should be liable to the same extent as if it was the branch of the bank. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
That's a good point raised by the minority leader. Correct. Yeah.
It should have the same liability as an ordinary bank because they transact with the public and they accept deposits from the public. Now,
Can you, Ms. Sufficiencia, can you give us an example? how are you granting the banks that apply to you the authority to issue a cash agent license? What do you ask from them? Do you ask is there an agreement between the PSP and the bank applying for a cash agent to make sure that those cash agents are covered by the bank if ever they I don't know the exact term, maybe the minority leader can help me here. For example, the PBIC protects depositors. So how about for these cash agents? If let's say they're not able to cover the withdrawal of a deposit.
Okay, ma'am. So it's the circular that governs the cash agent operations of a. I mean,
What
from
circular are you referring
Circular
to?
940 po, BSP Circular 940, which establishes the guidelines for cash agent operations.
Can you
And-
submit? I'm sure we have it, but resubmit
Yes, we
that
will
to our
submit.
office. So
Yes, ma'am.
940, it's a memo circular.
It's a circular po.
Okay, can you tell us? Can you cite a provision from that 940 that might be able to address the concerns of our minority leader?
Okay, ma'am. So let me find that. So under section 4 of that circular, wait lang, ma'am. So under section 5 po pala, letter item C, there's a provision requiring bank to assume full responsibility and liability for all acts and omissions of its cash agents on bank-related services. But we had to put on bank-related service as a qualifier on the assumption that these cash agents are retail outlets which may have other commercial activities. Like in the case of convenience stores po, of course the banks cannot be held responsible for that for the non-bank transaction. That's why we had to put that there po. And then the next statement goes, the bank shall exercise due diligence lang po dito nakasulat, Senator, to ensure its cash agents comply with applicable rules, regulations, and policies on AML, consumer protection, bank secrecy, and consumer data confidentiality.
Perhaps, Senator Drilon, we can also look at that memo circular 940 and see which provisions there we should add into our committee report just to strengthen the position of the BSP that banks should be held liable for their cash agents.
Yes, ma'am. I manifested it earlier when I had my opportunity to ask questions. In other words, the contracting bank should be fully responsible for the acts of the agent in the same manner that the bank is responsible for the acts committed by its own employees. Pareho lang ito eh. A bank inspector, a bank teller, etc. When they present themselves to the public, they are agents of the bank. When the bank agent presents itself to the public, it is the agent of the contracting bank, and therefore the public has the right to consider the acts of the agents as the acts of the bank. Except, of course, I would agree with you, non-related malfeasance or misfeasance. Yeah, if the bank agent manager would rape an employee there in the same contracting bank, should that be made liable in the same manner that it is not liable if the same incident happens to a bank employee. But it was very simple in my mind. Just make the bank agent assume the same responsibility as it would assume for its directly hired employees engaged in this kind of activity. That's the overall premise that I have, Madam Chair, for this issue. Now, a question: would the bank agents or cash agents have would accept deposits? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. They can facilitate self-service deposit transactions for the bank clients.
Would the client bank agent client's deposit be covered by the PDIC?
Yes, sir, because this is a deposit account, a bank account.
Okay,
Would
how will
the-
it look like? I'm sorry if I
Yeah,
may
go
just
ahead.
follow up the question. If I make a deposit to a cash agent under, let's say, BDO, do I get a passbook that says BDO, or does it say mom and pop,
So,
whatever the store is?
yeah, so it will be a bank issued deposit, what we call it, deposit proof. So proof of deposit. So it can be an ATM, not necessarily a passbook po. Pwede pong ATM, pwede pong ganun po na it can even be a cardless account if that's the business model of the bank. But it's a bank issued instrument po, payment instrument, account transaction instrument. And you had a question earlier, Madam Chair, on the basic requirement for a bank applying for a cash agent, and it's the ability, it's their electronic banking solution, because a key requirement for agent operations and agent transactions is that it should facilitate real-time recognition of transactions in the books in the books of the bank. So when you deposit po you make a deposit transaction with a cash agent, dapat yung deposit niyo po reflected real time sa bangko po sa books po ng bank.
So talagang this will be in tandem with our program to make sure that all of those far-flung areas actually have internet connection.
Yes, ma'am. So it relies really po on connectivity. The proliferation, the expansion of our agent network is also reliant on the availability of good internet connection.
Yun yung problema yung ibang mga remote areas. That's the reason why they don't have these banks there, kasi they don't have, they're very remote. Okay, well, anyway, it doesn't matter, because that's just one of the criteria why we're doing this, is also to make it user-friendly to our countrymen. So even in areas with established banks already, they might still decide to go to a cash agent just because they're more familiar or they're more comfortable doing that. But again, it's an issue also of connectivity.
Yes. Next question, Madam BSP. Would the cash agents be covered by the Anti-Money Laundering Act?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If they are covered by the AMLA, are they covered by the reporting requirements?
It's the bank that does the reporting, sir. So because they're using also the system of the bank, actually.
Okay. So the reporting is done by the bank. Okay.
Yes, sir. They are the covered
Okay, as a
persons.
practical matter, let's say there is a suspicious account transaction.
Yeah.
Who determines that and who reports that?
It's captured supposedly by the system of the bank, and that's reported by the bank to the AML. And then
Senator Drilon, this is actually going to be quite interesting to see, because no, I mean it's really a good goal to have. But can you imagine training, let's say, a store owner to be able to handle the complexities of banking? So it's really going to the bank that will succeed here is the one that can have the most user-friendly system that complies with regulations. Kasi imagine mo yan, kailangan pag lumagpas ng 500,000 per day ang deposit niyan, i-report nyo kaagad yan. Di ba yung mga ganun na, well, I'm not saying that they will, be taking in as much cash as that, but it's possible, how some people's minds work. Pwede tayo dito kasi hindi mahalata. Di ba? So, dapat mabilis yung mga bangko dyan na makahuli ng mga repetitive deposits that are suspicious. So again, how will they teach agents to comply? Medyo komplikado rin ang banking. Pero anyway, sige, ayan mo. Problema nila yan. Basta may liability sila.
For example, Madam BSP, how would the cash agents comply with the know your customer rule or know your client rule?
So they accept po the identification documents, but the actual opening of accounts happen at the actual bank, at the bank po, not at the point of the agent. So the final decision to open an account, to do the onboarding, still rests with the bank, but the agent facilitates the KYC process.
To be candid with you, Madam BSP, I have my very serious doubts about the ability to comply with all these AMLA rules insofar as these cash agents are concerned. Simply impossible. And this exposes a weakness in our system, because here you are, there are no limits on the amount of deposits, is there?
Sir, that is up to the bank po, based on their risk management policy po. So,
yeah,
usually po, dun sa mga transactions with agents, and as I mentioned earlier, the Cebuana Luwilier Rural Bank, they do account opening for their micro savings account, which is a no-frill basic deposit account with some restrictions. So, medyo dun po, somehow may controls na because of the type of products that are being offered in these cash agents. Hindi po to yung mga sophisticated product. So like a basic deposit account, up to 50,000 lang po yung balance niyan. And then the banks are expected to establish controls po in line with their AML compliance.
Wait a minute, so there's a limit as to the maximum amount of deposits?
No.
No, ma'am. I just mentioned, yung dun lang po sa one example of a bank with a cash agent operation offers a basic deposit account through their cash agents. And yung basic deposit account po is a type of deposit product that has very parang no frill siya na account, so simplified KYC, but has restrictions in terms of limits, balance limits up to 50,000 lang po.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Attorney Arifa from the Bangko Central.
Yes, please go ahead, Attorney Arifa.
Yes. In addition to what Joyce mentioned, I'd like to highlight that not all banks applying to operate cash agency can be permitted or allowed by the BSP. We look at the profile of the banking institution. One of the requirements is that the banking institution should not have major supervisory concerns and that they have appropriate systems in place to ensure that the cash agent would be able to comply with rules and regulations. And the banking institution is also expected to ensure that the cash agents, because cash agents are their extension of their personality, would comply with those rules and regulations, including AML regulations, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, good in theory. Very good. If it's on paper, you read it, it's very good. But when you start thinking of the application, you'll have nightmares, if I may say. Now, which brings me to the question, which jurisdictions would have cash agents similar to ours?
Marami po actually. So, Brazil, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, most most Latin American countries have agent banking operations, and that's how they really drive their financial inclusion figures through the cash agents. And most of these cash agent operations are led by state-owned banks po. Kasi sila po talaga yung may interest and mandate to reach the rural communities that are not served by commercial banks and the private banks. So in most countries, state-owned banks po ang nangunguna sa agent banking operations.
Well, Madam Chair, I guess that's the questions I have in mind, which I go back to my original proposition that this law, the bill, should be more of a regulatory piece of legislation, given the magnitudes and the number of cash agents that we're talking about, and the fact that the public deals, or they deal with the public, and I do not want, and that is why, if I may say, I concur with the good chair that we should look at, the committee should look at Circular 940 series of 2017 and see and adopt it with the additional safeguards that the committee may suggest to the central bank, because I do not know if it has happened, but one of these days baka pumutok ito that nagamit yung mga cash agents as a vehicle through which transactions are made, which can lead to some difficulties in our financial system. So rather than an encouragement of the cash agents system, which is all over the place in the first place, and already we're saying that only 5% of our entire in fact, only 5% of all the municipalities would have no access points for cash transactions. Then we should really go into regulation rather than more encouragement or development of this system, because I would like to think that this should be the thrust of the committee report, rather than trying to increase the deposit base or the client base, which is already, I would like to think, all covered, with 95% of the municipalities having access points for our deposit system. So that's my submission, Madam Chair, to the committee.
Thank you to our minority leader. In fact, since it's Memo Circular 940-2017 is a memo circular, it can actually be changed. That's why it's better that it's included in the law, whatever safeguards we would like to make sure stays as we roll out these cash agents policy bill. Anyway,
just one more point, I forgot that very major. On page 2, lines 2 and 3, I would propose to exclude that from the committee report, because the matter of rules and regulations is already covered by a subsequent section. I think it's section 15 of the bill. Under section 15 of the bill, this is the more standard provision for implementing rules. I do not see the point of lines 2 and 3 when it says the Monetary Board may, by regulation, further define or clarify terms used in this act consistent with declared policies, state policies above. Two things. Number one, this is not necessary because there's already section 15. Number two, it opens up the opportunity, as our fellow senators would usually complain, that the regulation changes the meaning of the law. And number three, we should be the state policy should be better regulation rather than expansion or encouragement of the cash agents. We should encourage the bank to branch out rather than have cash agents. At least when the banks would branch out, then there is more institutionalized regulation of an activity which is really full of public interest or immersed in public interest, and that is the depositing public. And therefore, the bank should be encouraged to expand its branches rather than these cash agents, which is, to me, it's a very loose proposition. And all the statements about by Attorney Ala and Ms. And Joyce here are good on paper, but I have my doubts about its efficacy on the ground. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you to our minority leader. Now we will go to the second part of our discussion. This is with regards to the OFW remittance fees. Who would like to make... Actually, let me ask the minority leader. Do you have a lot of questions about this, or would you have more questions on the Philippine Veterans Bank?
I just have a few questions, Madam Chair.
No, because
take this up. Just a few.
Whatever's easier to discuss, we will do that first.
All are hard.
Such is the nature of this committee, by the way. Anyway, okay, so let's begin with the OFW remittance fees. Do we have a presentation from any of our resource persons? From the BSP? Can you give us an idea on the fees now being charged by current banks on remittance fees from our OFWs? Okay, because if nobody can do this, I'm going to have to skip this, because how are we going to discuss this if we don't even know the official amounts being charged by the banks? Because basically the intention of this law is very good. If you are an OFW and you are sending money, or even a worker sending money to your family, you will either be offered a discounted rate for the remittances, and also protection when it comes to the type of currency being received by the recipient. Like you can specify, I want them to receive it in the original currency it was sent, like for example, dollars. And we see this happen, US dollars, for example. We see this happen if, let's say, you charge your credit card abroad and you say charge in Philippine peso, and then you realize that the conversion rate is not fair. So you lose already a few peso or a few dollars just by the conversion rate being decided upon by the financial institution you are using. So right now, I would like to know, for example, how much do commercial banks in the Philippines charge for remittance fees? Do we have anybody who can talk about this, or else I'm going to have to defer this bill to another time until we get somebody who can discuss this?
Yes, I agree with you, Madam Chair. I have questions along the same line. How much, okay, you mentioned, yes, what is the remittance fee being charged to the client, to the overseas Filipino workers? What is the total estimate of this? And because the proposed bill also grants an incentive, ma'am, it provides for an incentive through a discounting, if I recall correctly, the bill, a discount on the remittance fees being paid. That's the way I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong. That's why we need the resource person here. For example, for example, if the remittance fee is just theoretically 100 pesos. Now, is it the intention of the bill to provide an incentive by providing for a discounted remittance fee? Is that that's how I understand it? I may be wrong.
Yes. Actually, to our Senator Drilon, That's precisely what this is trying to do. What the problem is this? It's saying that there should be a discount for OFWs remitting money to their families. So one of the questions I have is actually, how do we determine who the family members are? For example, what proof do they have to show? Birth certificate ba? Ganyan, ganito, ganyan. Because right now, BPI and Metrobank, this is what they charge. From 150 to 300 pesos and above per country territory basis. Example, Hong Kong, from 130 to 260. Japan from 340 to 900 and above. Then there's also BDO Kabayan Savings. And then one of the proposals, for example, is that the remittance fees should not be taken out from the money actually being remitted. Remittance fees should be separate. That's one of the proposals. But it's very difficult to continue talking about this. This is the bill of Senator Pacquiao and also Senator Bong Revilla, unless we have a...
We have Senator Pacquiao and Senator Bong Revilla probably explain what this bill is about.
Well, yeah, that would be nice. Ideally, that should be maybe perhaps an opening statement from them. So for now,
I would like the BIR to tell us what the position here, because the structure is there is a discount granted, but the discount can be a tax deduction. So I think it is important to know how much is the collection of remittance fee, what is 20% of that, which will be a tax deduction, which is no longer which is not taxable anymore because it's a tax deduction. So how much will that involve in terms of actual reduction of remittance of fees to the government? I mean, what in effect we're doing here in this bill is we are transferring the burden to the government, the burden of that the OFW is otherwise liable for. This is the remittance fee. To the extent of 20% of the remittance fee, that is considered as a tax deduction, and as a tax deduction, then no taxes will be paid. In effect, we're transferring the burden from the OFW to the government. Nice. I mean, we endorse it. I am sure that the good chair would endorse it. The issue is, how does the BIR look at this? And then we look at this in terms of how much would be our losses in terms of tax revenues. That's very important. So these are data, these are things which we cannot decide on unless somebody can explain to us what this bill is all about. Thank you very much, Madam.
Okay, so in that case, is the minority leader in agreement that maybe we should defer this?
Yes. We should defer it until somebody can explain to us what this bill is all about. Maybe the authors can explain to us.
Yes, and also I think that I hope that after the explanation we will be enlightened, and I think that it again, in principle, it is a good bill because yung mga OFW natin nagpapadala ng pera dito. So at hindi lang yon, even our workers working away from home within the country are using this system. So, but we have to have representatives from the commercial banks present also to explain what their fees are currently. Is it justifiable for us to actually, I think later on we can ask the Bankers Association of the Philippines, but then I think we should also have actual members from the different banking companies to be present, as well as the BIR and the BSP, if we can ask them also to study this bill and say something about it later on. Because, yes. So for that, we will move on to the next item in our agenda, and that's the Philippine Veterans Bank. Do we have the chairman of the Philippine Veterans Bank to make a presentation, perhaps? Tell us what this is about.
Yes, Madam Chairman, Senator Poe, I'm here. The bill basically does two main things. One, it expands the equity of the Philippine Veterans Bank to the prescribed equity that is prescribed under the regulations of the BSP from where it is now to 10 billion, which is what a private commercial bank's equity ought to be by BSP standards. The second is to be able to expand the constituency base of the bank so that from its original constituency of World War II veterans, it expands the meaning of veterans to align with the definition under the law of what veterans are. So that would be World War II and all other veterans who served in other wars, as well as veterans by virtue of their retirement from the armed forces. As you will recall, historically, this bank was created to be owned by the veterans of World War II, and it is in a sense to be able to have a continuing, in a sense, reflection of the nation's gratitude to the heroes of World War II that gave us our freedom, and also to be able to have a financial institution which can give them continuing supplementary support to that is given by the national government. It has been in existence since 1960s. This bill had been passed through the House of Representatives after several rigorous sessions and hearings, etc. And during those hearings, all the parties involved were represented: the BSP, the Philippine Veterans Bank, the World War II veterans, the Veterans Federation, and so forth and so on. And all the inputs from them were taken into account and agreed upon, which is why it comes as no surprise to me when I saw the Senate Bill 2139 that it mirrors Republic Act 8164, since the provisions had been thoroughly discussed. Once the bill is passed, then we would be able to begin our efforts to increase the bank's equity, which would give it a platform for becoming a continuing, professionally managed private commercial bank. And as I often say, if the bank is properly managed, then you would have a bank that the veterans can rely upon. And because it is a private commercial bank, while its core constituency are the veterans, it is not prohibited from seeking customers, clients, borrowers, etc., from the general public. That's the gist of my presentation, Senator.
Thank you. Actually, we've had a conversation already about this, Mr. De Ocampo, and I appreciate how you're very, very progressive about managing this bank. As we've already discussed, it's been decades since the charter has been amended. Now, I just want to emphasize also for this body that actually we are expanding the definition of veterans to not just include World War II. Marami na tayong mga veterans na hindi lamang World War II veterans. And in fact, konti na lang ang sa World War II compared to the other veterans that we have. So that's one good point of the amendment of this. Number two, also to increase capitalization. Now, I would like you to clarify, when you increase the capitalization of 10 billion to 10 billion, you are going to open this up to other shareholders, right? But then you're saying that the control will still be with the veterans. Am I correct? Or am I understanding this incorrectly?
That is not explicit. When you raise capital, then those that provide the lion's share of capital over time may be in control. Right now, the bank is 100% owned by the veterans of World War II. When we issue a call for capitalization invitations, then we would, of course, issue a call to the veterans of World War II and their heirs, because they do have preemptive rights. after which we will issue a call as well to others. Now, I cannot forecast right now what the configuration will be, but in the foreseeable future, it will be still within the majority of the World War II veterans.
Well, thank you for your candid response. Actually, Mr. De Ocampo, how will you differentiate your bank as a veterans bank from other commercial banks with the new setup that you're proposing?
It's differentiated from the very definition of its name because it has our vision, Senator, is to position this bank as the primary bank for the veterans, the armed forces, the military personnel, and the uniformed personnel as
No,
our.
exactly how will you position? Will you give them preference or in
Yes,
terms
of
of
course.
loans, in terms
Yes,
of
of course. There,
okay,
there are provisions. There are provisions in the bill itself, which actually carry over from previous bills, that allow us to provide special grants in aid, assistance of all kinds, medical, etc., primarily and in fact exclusively for veterans. So a big client like a big corporation may be borrowing more from us, but they are not qualified to get grants in aid, assistance, and so forth because they're not veterans.
okay, because the reason why I raised this point is, as we know, let's say the land bank is supposed to lend more to our farmers, but right now it's operating more as a commercial bank. And then the DBP is also supposed to give more to MSMEs, but as we know, larger corporations have benefited from the funding from the DBP. So with Veterans Bank, for example, a veteran will apply for a loan and a non-veteran will apply for a loan. How would you treat the veterans in terms of the loan application? Would they get priority? Would the same conditions apply to all borrowers?
Well, in terms of the viability of the project that they're borrowing from, the bank can only treat them on even terms. Being a veteran is not a reason to present a project which cannot stand the test of financial viability. However, the fact that they're veteran would immediately give them priority for our listening to their proposal over, say, a non-veteran. But you know, in the context of daily operations, you don't sequence these things. What happens really is that we do give a signal that veterans are primarily welcome to come to the Veterans Bank to be
Okay, so
Veterans
sir, for
Bank.
example, in terms of the earnings of the Veterans Bank, the profits, how much of what percentage are you allocating for veterans affairs and concerns?
There is an entire section, I think it's section 23 of the law, which provides that in detail. Because we should be providing dividends to the shareholders, and the shareholders are mainly the veterans. Now, according to SEC rules, that amount of dividends will depend on our degree of retained earnings. You may be aware, of course, that we have not been able to give dividends for a number of years. And the reason for that is because the bank was not in a position to be giving dividends, and the BSP prevented any outlay for that, which is precisely why we seek to amend the charter of the bank to give it a much stronger equity base, to give it a better chance to be profitable, and to provide those benefits that are intended for the veterans.
Okay, maybe we have somebody from the Bangko Central who can comment on the position of our I'm sorry, I just got this. Do we have anybody from the Bangko Central who can speak about this?
Yes, Madam
Comment?
Chair. This is Attorney Arifa Ala from the Bangko Central ng
Yes,
Pilipinas.
Attorney Ala, go ahead, please.
Yes, the Bangko Central supports the initiative to enhance the Philippine Veterans Banks because ultimately this will redound to the benefit of the veterans who are the members of the bank. We also support the initiative to strengthen the capitalization of the bank, as this has been one of the supervisory concerns being raised by the BSP. We also noted that the House Bill number 8164, the provisions thereof are lifted verbatim into the Senate bill. So we just would like to raise just 2 points. First is on Section 5A on the increasing of the capital stock of the bank to 10 billion. We note that the capital stock will be raised to 10 billion, but it is possible that the capital requirement by the BSP will exceed 10 billion. So to address that particular situation, the bill should provide flexibility to the bank's board of directors to increase the capitalization of the bank without amending the bill, because it will be very difficult for the bank to again amend the bill just to increase its capitalization. And next comment is just a minor one, because in section 5B, line 13 on page 2, there was a mention that the articles of incorporation, when it increases authorized capital stock, is being approved by the BSP. Actually, the Bangko Central does not approve the same. It merely makes favorable endorsement to the Securities and Exchange Commission, and it is the SEC which approves the same. So in this regard, we propose that we delete the phrase approved by the BSP. So those are the 2 comments from the BSP, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Attorney Ala. If it's possible, please submit your position paper so that we can incorporate that in our committee report.
Yes, Madam Chair. We will
thank you.
submit the position. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney. Perhaps our minority leader has some additional points to make and questions.
No. I am interested and want to follow up the statement of Attorney Ala. Under the proposed measure, would increases in the capital stock no longer require a government or a legislative action correctly? Is that how I understand it? In other words, future increases of the capital stock of the Veterans Bank will be treated in terms of processing it like any ordinary bank, meaning that it's submitted to the Bangko Central for favor endorsement to the SEC and no longer amend the charter as we are doing now. Is that correct, ma'am?
Mr. Senator, the bank can actually amend its articles of incorporation. And then, however, based on the bill, the authorized capital stock of the bank is up to 10 billion pesos only. So if there's conflict, even if the bank would amend its articles of incorporation and increase it to, let's say, 11 billion, that would contradict the provision of this bill. So the SEC will not approve it. So that's why our proposal is to provide flexibility for the board of directors of the bank to increase the authorized capital stock, so that in the future there's no need to amend the law just to increase the capitalization of the bank.
I agree, ma'am, that indeed it should not require congressional approval just to increase the authorized capital stock. It should be an action of the board, on stockholders, and endorsed by the central bank before it is approved and effective by the SEC. I agree fully with that. Otherwise, it will be a very difficult position for the land bank to take. Now, the land bank has only how many? 60
Veterans
branches.
Bank.
Huh?
Veterans Bank, Senator. You said land bank.
Veterans Bank.
Veterans Bank. I'm sorry. Veterans Bank has only 60 branches.
Yes, Senator, that's right.
You should, rather than have cash agents, we should have more branches for the Philippine Veterans Bank because because this can provide a better service and better security to our depositors. So first, I want to make it a record, Madam Chair, that I fully support this bill that would strengthen and allow the expansion of the Philippine Veterans Bank. Now, so the additional requirement, capital requirement, who would subscribe to this, Mr. Ocampo?
Right now, Senator, the bank has approximately 2.5 billion in capital, and we're going to, by agreement with the BSP, we are going to try to reach 10 billion by the year 2025. We believe that within the foreseeable future, we will easily reach 5 billion by getting another 2 billion from those that are going to buy shares of stock of the Philippine Veterans Bank. This will be from World War II heirs, most likely, and also veterans, since we have already expanded the definition of veterans. Now that will give you a total of approximately 5 billion. We have another 2 billion or 1.5 billion that we can provide by sale of real estate assets, etc., of the bank. As you know, most banks do end up with assets that they foreclose and so forth, and these are for sale. And then finally, the bank would be profitable if they had a platform of equity of that volume. And it is normal practice for part of that of the earnings to be plowed back into a reserve fund for the purpose of contributing to the equity. So that's how we plan to get it done.
Yes. Mr. Ocampo, my impression is that your ability to meet your capital requirements and even on the increase of your capital stock would be limited by the limitation of investors that they should qualify as veterans. Is that a correct statement?
No. In fact, we had expanded it in that in the bill. It shows there that it can be veterans of World War II, all other veterans, and the private sector. So we do have a wide net.
So private
Which is
sector,
preference, of course.
yeah, we can have investments by the private sector.
Yes, I think that's in the bill.
That's in the bill now.
Yeah.
But are we assured that this, notwithstanding these additional investors, the bank will remain under the control of the veterans for which it is constituted?
Right now, as I explained to Senator Poe, it is 100% owned by the veterans of World War II. The plan, of course, is to give preference in the initial invitation to capital to veterans of World War II and the heirs and so forth, and next preference would be to all other veterans. I think if you're thinking in terms of 10 billion, of which we already have about 2.5 in the bag, and we put another equal amount from veterans and World War II veterans, that would be at least 51%.
Okay. Yes, well, we have no other question on this measure, Madam Chair. We fully endorse a committee report that will endorse for plenary approval the proposed measure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Julon, I think I see the hand of Yusek Carolina. Would you like to add anything briefly, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, maraming salamat po Sa ngalan po ng mga veterano, gusto namin bumati sa ating Madam Chair at sa ating minority leader. We have submitted the position paper po ni Secretary Lorenzana at ng ating mga veterano. Kasama po namin ang Veterans Federation representing 160,000 strong veterans. Kami po yung sector supposed to be benefited by this proposed law. Kaya masaya po kami. We are the Secretary and we, representing the veterans, PIBAW, have expressed our full support to this law. We look forward to it dahil yung tanong po ni Senator Dillon kanina, natatandaan ko po, Madam Chair, there is a provision in the law that assures that at any one time, the majority of the equity should be owned by veterans. Nakalagay po yun doon sa provisional law. And we fully support the objectives of the law, which is to expand its capitalization and its equity base, accepting the veterans, the post-World War II veterans, Madam Chair. And we believe that the armed forces can contribute a lot in making this a vibrant bank because, Madam Chair, we are one of the biggest consumers in logistics. Ang payroll po namin, ang armed forces, the uniformed services, tas yung pension fund po na laging napapansin ni Senator Dillon dahil talagang lumalaki. Kung meron na pong Philippine Veterans Bank na talagang nandun na rin po kami, tas yung modernization po namin na about 30 billion a year, I think yung potential po na may papasok ng sektor namin ay talaga pong napakalaki. So, meron lang po kaming isang concern, Madam Chair, kasi hindi rin namin pwedeng ipaisang tabi yung concern ng aming mga veterano. I have a chart here. Gusto ko lang po namin ipatanggal ito pong insertion sa section 23B. Tinatawag ko pong insertion na Madam Chair kasi wala po ito sa original bill, sa original law na ating ina-amend, yung pong Republic Act 3518, which is the charter of the Philippine Veterans Bank. So, idinagdag po nila ito, yung naka-highlight, including maintenance and improvement of its offices, buildings, etc., nung pong Board of Trustees of Veterans of World War II. Ang reason po, kaya namin pinapatanggal, nandito po sa next chart, ay kasi po, gusto po namin mapabilis ang approval ng batas na to. Makakasagabal po ito because of a legal questions po ng ating mga veterano. Number one po, yung pong 2.4 hectares na in-insert nila, pag-aari po nakaproclaim sa Veterans Federation of the Philippines. And yung pong proclamation na yon is a power vested on the President. And meron pong provision na independence ng separation of the powers of the executive and the legislative. Yung pong pag-reclassify at pag-proclaim ng mga lupa in the public domain, nasa powers po ng President. So, pag ilagay po natin ito sa insertion na to, ay in effect, we are reallocating the 2.4 hectares contrary to what the President has already proclaimed. Please note po that the insertion states that the maximum limit may even be increased upon mutual agreement between Veterans Bank and the Board of Trustees of Veterans of World War II. When in fact, the property is proclaimed to BFP. In other words, para pong yung dalawang hindi may-ari, pwede sila po ang magkaroon ng kapangyarihan dun sa lupa na yun. Pangalawa po, itong non-impairment clause. Ito pong 2.4 hectares na ito ay covered ng kontrata, meron pong memorandum of agreement between the BFP and the Board of Trustees. Very clear po sa Constitution, mga kontrata po should be allowed to take their due course at hindi po dapat mag-i-intervene unnecessarily ang state.
Okay, actually, Yusek Carolina, maraming salamat po. We actually received this position paper. Definitely, this is very important to consider. I would like to, with your permission, I'd like now to hear the comments of the Veterans Bank Chairman, Mr. Ocampo, with regards to this, deleting this insertion. Thank you, sir.
Senator, this particular provision had been thoroughly discussed during the deliberations in Congress. And I don't know what insertion means, because that was already in the original House bill offered by the authors, which was then transformed into Republic Act 86, 81, 64. So we had covered these grounds. Now, having said that, when we discussed this, when this was originally discussed, the original bill authored included all land that was under Proclamation 192, and I think you have copies of these. But after deliberations, we agreed to reduce it to just those the properties that are covered by a memorandum of agreement between the Board of Trustees and the VFP, which memorandum of agreement was signed in May 2011 and has a period of 40 years. Now, that memorandum, Senator, was an agreement in order to establish facilities and buildings, etc., for the purpose of enhancing veteran welfare. Those buildings are actually there. Okay, there is a museum, there are the offices of the veterans, there is an auditorium that the veterans use, and there is a medical center that provides medical assistance to veterans, and therefore everything is in keeping with what are the uses agreed upon for that place. Now, that is all under Section 23, Senator, because Section 23 is entitled the distribution of net profits. And I think what was intended is not to have a very general statement about how one distributes profits, but in the interest of good governance and professional banking, to be able to more clearly define what is being spent for. Now, over the years since 2011, and probably even before that, the bank has been providing assistance for those buildings and premises that are covered under memorandum of agreement. And we wanted to make sure that under the provisions of what's to be given as a net profit, it is specific, not general, and that we can track where the funds are going and that they're going for that purpose.
Okay, Senator Drilon, I thought I saw him raise his hand earlier, or not anymore?
Yes. I'm just struck by the presentation of Undersecretary Carolina, particularly when he asserted that the proposed Section 23 is alien and is a rider to the present bill because it has no relation to the present bill. There it says, the insertion is not relevant to the purpose of Senate Bill number 2139. I take it to mean that Section 23 has nothing to do with or is totally alien to the purpose of the bill, and therefore is a rider because it contains a subject not related to the bill. Because this is a constitutional issue. I do not see any extensive discussion on this, but this strikes me as an important issue. Would the USEC Carolina submit a position paper which would elaborate on the on this issue of relevancy and submit it to the committee?
With your permission, yes, Madam Chair, Sir Minority Floor Leader. Gusto ko lang po idagdag, ang pinanggagalingan namin, gusto po namin mapabilis ito. Pero dahil po hawak na ng korte Yun po yung pang-apat ko. Meron na pong ipinail na kaso ang Veterans Federation against the Board of Trustees sa Taguig Court. And yung Board of Trustees, meron na rin pong pinail na TRO. And so, makakadelay po yun dahil hawak, the court has taken jurisdiction on this issue. At totoo po, ang tinatawag po namin rider, yung idinagdag. Hindi naman po yung section na 23, kagalang-galang na Senator Drilon. Ang sinasabi po namin, doon sa original law, nandito naman po yung section 23. Pero in-insert nila, dinagdag nila itong dulo. At sa tingin namin, walang kinalaman po doon sa pinag-uusapan natin na increase the capitalization and expand the ownership base of the bank or the viability of the bank. Ito po talaga, hindi po trabaho ng bangko kasi kami po, that's where I'm coming. Kami po ang nananagot sa kapakanan ng mga veterano. Hindi po ang Philippine Veterans Bank. We take care of the World War II veterans. Natatandaan po ni Senator Drilon. Kasama po kayo sa nag-approve yung World War II veterans. Tinaasan ninyo yung kanilang pension to 20,000. Yung ordinary veteran, 5,000 lang. Kaya the state, hindi po tayo nagkukulang sa taking care of the World War II veterans and their descendants. Ito pong section 23 is enough na po na pagkilala dahil nakalagay dyan po yung allocation of the net profit, 20% of net earnings pupunta na po sa kanila in terms of grants and aid. In-insert lang po nila to, dinagdag nila na isama yung 2.4 hectares na covered po ng Memorandum of Agreement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you po, Yusa Carolina. Actually, at face value, we see your point. I think hindi naman to makaka-detract doon sa intensyon ng batas na to, kung sakasakali, na palawigin ang kapital ng Veterans Bank. So, I think that we will just get a copy of this and then we will study it and see if this will not actually render the bill useless without this bill. Because if it's in the jurisdiction of the court, we agree we might run into problems. We have to look at this case more extensively before making a decision, and then we will include that in the committee report. If our minority leaders in agreement, maybe this particular provision we shall set aside.
Yes, I agree because really, I am not familiar with this issue, and that's why I asked for a position paper from both sides, so that if the committee in its good judgment will deal with this, let's deal with this in the manner that is consistent with the provisions of the Constitution.
Okay. So with that, I think that we all agree that both senators present here today are in support of this bill to increase the capitalization of the Veterans Bank. It's long overdue, and we believe that the more there will be more potential of service not only to our veterans but also to the economy as a whole with the expansion of the Veterans Bank. But we have to tread lightly when it comes to certain provisions that might come into conflict with pending cases in court, because again, we cannot assume giving authority to something that is within the provision of the court. So with that, we will adjourn this hearing, and we will work to come up with a viable committee report that will hopefully pass this bill. Again, when it comes to the bills on the remittance discounts for our OFWs, we will await the presence of the main authors to explain, or perhaps if they cannot make it, we will have to expand in the invitation to commercial bank representatives to explain what the current charges are for the OFWs. I would also like to request data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to please submit to our office the current charges on average by the banks and the fees that they generate, and also the BIR to comment on the possible tax incentives given to the banks that will comply with the law if we pass it. So with that, I'd like to thank the minority leader, our resource persons for your presence here today. Mag-lunch na po kayo. This hearing is now adjourned.
Salamat po.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator.
You.
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Senator.